This webinar is brought to you by Thomas and Xometry, your partners in growth. Today, we'll be diving into CMMC compliance and funding support. Specifically, we'll be talking about what that means, why it matters, and how you can prepare. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping notes. First of all, the session is being recorded, and we'll share a copy of the recording with you after the presentation. Second, you are welcome to submit questions at any time. We will save the last 10 minutes or so of the presentation for questions. If you want to ask a question of a specific panelist, feel free to mention that when you submit your question. And then lastly, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, try refreshing your Zoom session or use the chat function for some tech support. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so Xometry and Thomas are your partners in growth, and we are dedicated to helping suppliers grow their businesses by providing access to work, resources, and industry expertise. Xometry connects suppliers with production-ready jobs that match their capabilities, along with tools to optimize cash flow. Thomas helps suppliers generate leads and grow their business through targeted advertising and industry connections. This webinar is just one of the many examples of educational resources that we provide to help you navigate compliance, industry trends, and business growth. Now it is time to introduce our expert panel and dive into today's topic, CMMC compliance. My name is Megan Conniff. I'm the Director of Content at both Thomas and Xometry, and we are joined here by these fantastic experts. Seth, can you give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I lead marketing at PreVeil and worked at the intersection of technology, compliance, security for 15 plus years. Speak it pretty regularly at industry conferences and write for some industry newsletters.
Excellent. And turning it over to Noelle, also at PreVeil.
Hi, I'm Noelle Vestal. It's very nice to meet everybody on the call. So I'm the Chief Compliance Officer. I work with Seth quite a bit. So I'm responsible for everything compliance related with CMMC and SOC 2 and ISO and pick a framework. Also, I have an interesting little side note because I've actually implemented these 110 NIST 800-171 controls that are CMMC level 2 before I came here to PreVeil. So I have that unique experience as well and happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Noelle. And lastly, introducing Michael.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me. So I'm Michael Kelleher. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland MEP, and we are the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center here in the state of Maryland. And I have been the Executive Director there for the last 12 years, and for the last, I would say 7 or 8, we've been heavily focused on cybersecurity compliance and CMMC and helping the industrial base comply with those regulations so that they can continue to be suppliers to the Department of Defense as well as the primes and tier 1s. So thank you for having me today.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. So we're excited to get started, and we're actually going to start with Michael today. We're going to be talking about the Maryland MEP. Michael?
Great. Thank you. Are we bringing the slides up, Megan? Oh, there we go. So as I said, I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland MEP. We are the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. For us here in Maryland, we're a nonprofit, so we're a 501c3, and our sole mission is to support and grow the manufacturers that we have in the state of Maryland. We are a statewide organization here in Maryland, and for us in Maryland, the landscape is there's roughly 4,000 manufacturers that are proud to call Maryland home, and you can imagine, just given the location close to DC, close to a number of forts and military installations, a large number of our manufacturers are in that defense supply chain, particularly the aerospace and defense. And it's a sector that continues to grow pretty rapidly here in Maryland. For Maryland MEP, we're actually part of the MEP National Network. Many people don't realize that the Manufacturing Extension Program is a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce and housed out of NIST MEP in Gaithersburg. And their mission, their charter, is to support manufacturing across the U.S. And the way they deliver on that mission is they provide funding to 51 MEP centers. So I know we have folks from all over the country on the webinar today. I'm proud to tell you and happy to tell you that you have an MEP in your backyard. There's an MEP in every state as well as Puerto Rico. We do go by some different branding and some different organizational structures, but the mission of this network and this system is to support and grow manufacturing in the U.S. and obviously supporting that defense industrial base and strengthening our domestic supply chains is more critical now than ever. And so those MEP centers are there to help with those processes. So the topic for the day, CMMC and cybersecurity. Why cybersecurity? Why now? As I said, this is something that for us here in Maryland, we dove into back in the beginning of 2017. And for those of you that aren't from the Maryland area, we're home to Fort Meade and we're home to NSA and a number of those other agencies. And so because of that, we are home to a wealth of resources when it comes to cybersecurity. So we jumped out in front of this as the federal government was beginning to bring down regulations, or more importantly, beginning to enforce some regulations about asking manufacturers and suppliers and those that are within critical supply chains and handling critical information to begin to pay attention to their cybersecurity policies, their cybersecurity practices, and their health. And for manufacturers and the DoD manufacturers, what that really boils down to is the DFARS, the NIST 800-171, and now our latest evolution of the CMMC requirements. And I'll dive a little bit into the kind of the why and the what, and I'm going to let our friends from PreVeil, our partners from PreVeil, really get into the tactical implementation side of this. But why cybersecurity and understanding the landscape? I can tell you in my role as the executive director of Maryland MEP, I get the good fortune of going out and calling on manufacturers across the state, across all industries. And, when we started this back in 2017, 2018, there was a push of, cybersecurity is not for us. That's a cost. Who cares about me? I'm just a small machine shop that's making parts. And what we've seen is that the supply chain is really one of the top targets for cyber attacks. The manufacturers who are in these supply chains are interconnected through their systems. They're interconnected through their technologies. And as we continue to move forward and begin to see companies adopt new technologies and smarter technologies and use sensors and machines and big data to better understand their processes, they're becoming more and more vulnerable to attacks. And if you're within any of those supply chains, what we're seeing or what the data has shown is that these attacks are targeting the least sophisticated of the systems, right? They're looking for vulnerabilities in some of those legacy operational technology systems. If you've got a CNC machine that might be 20 years old on your floor, and it's the least protected point of entry, those are becoming critical attack infrastructures. And those are really the technologies and the systems that have the least security around them. When we talk to manufacturers about cybersecurity, everybody looks at their IT infrastructure, but too often the operational technology infrastructure is lacking. And that's where we're most vulnerable and where our enemies are looking to attack the points in the supply chain where they can gain access and get upstream in those particular critical systems. A little bit of background on CMMC. As I said, this is not something that's new. The federal government started with the FAR and the DFARS requirements, asking all companies and all defense suppliers to begin to pay attention to these things. That evolved into the NIST 800-171 requirements that Noel talked about, the 110 requirements of complying with NIST 800-171 to be a good supplier to the defense industrial base. And beginning in 2019, when CMMC was first announced, it was the next evolution of cybersecurity, and it was the next evolution of helping our manufacturing base here domestically protect information that is critical to these supply chains and critical to the end products that we're making. Even if we're just making a small piece part or a small component, if we have access to that controlled information or that classified information or even just some of that sensitive information, it's more important than ever that we implement these controls so that we can remain good suppliers and protect that infrastructure upstream as well as downstream. And so you can see here the timeline. It started in 2019. It went through a few different iterations. And really in December 2024, so just a few months ago, the CMMC 2.0 rule took effect. And what we're seeing now is these requirements are starting to show up, and they are showing up in contract language. So suppliers that are receiving contracts and subcontracts from their primes or their tier ones are seeing this cybersecurity language, and they're being asked to demonstrate compliance with these things if they want to remain a supplier to the federal government and to the defense infrastructure. So this is just a snapshot of the timeline, and it's had some starts and stops as it's come forward, but we're seeing it now more than ever that it's important for manufacturers to pay attention to these things. And if you haven't already begun to do so, really get caught up and take action. So one, you can continue to receive new contracts, but also more importantly, so that you don't lose existing contracts. And a little bit about the CMMC 2.0. Again, it's evolved a little bit. So it's based around 3 levels. Level 1 is really just about good cyber practices, right? And that level only requires a self-assessment and a self-attestation. And then as you get into level 2 and level 3, you can see from the model here on the right, and I know Noel and Seth will cover this in a little bit more detail. Level 2 is where we're going to see most of our manufacturers in the defense supply chain that are handling controlled, unclassified information, that are handling information that is sensitive. And it is the equivalent to the more traditional NIST 800-171. So those 110 controls are what are required, and the details, it's a little bit of a detailed in-depth analysis and assessment that a company must undergo and certify that they comply to, and use outside assistance in doing so. Let me go to the next slide. And that gets into the self-assessment versus the certification process. You can see based on the level that you are, and based on the information that you're handling, what is required. So that level 1 really is a self-assessment with an affirmation on your contract. You enter your results into your supplier performance system. Annually, you reassess and make sure that you're continuing to practice industry best practices. But then as you move up those certification levels, it really is starting to use a reliance of some outside resources, using a certified C3PAO who will conduct the assessment. They'll verify the data that's being provided. They'll verify the compliance with those things, and they'll help you with the steps along the way. And those results are entered into the supplier EMAS system, so that the DoD and the primes and the tier ones have a good record of who are good qualified suppliers, who are suppliers that are meeting these different levels of requirements, so they can start to use those in that information in their procurement analysis and decision making. And the way the rule has rolled out, level 1, right, is pretty simple. A supplier's either met it or not met it. Level 2, as I said, has 110 controls, and there is a minimum compliance level, but it also allows a supplier to have a plan of action and milestones, right? So within 180 days, they're able to develop what is your plan to fix your deficiencies, and how are you going to meet those, and what are the milestones that we can verify on that. And then the level 3, I believe Noel will talk a little bit more about this. It takes those 110 controls and it adds an additional 24 practices or controls that are needed. So you've got to maintain that level 2 certification plus, so that you're demonstrating, really the top of the line ability to handle controlled and classified information. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our partners at PreVeil. They work with a number of MEP centers around the country, and really do a world-class job helping companies understand this information, and more importantly, how do they make it real within their operational structures on the plant floor. So Noel, Steph?
Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate it. So I'll be kicking it off, and then you get to hear from Seth. Don't worry, it's not just me. That was an amazing overview of CMMC. So, like I said earlier at the beginning when we were talking about introductions, I'm the compliance officer at PreVeil, so I deal with everything compliance. I also work directly with a lot of our different customers, who are quite a few of them manufacturers themselves. So, I myself do not come from a manufacturing background. I come from a DoD IT program management background, so it's been really educational for me in the 3 years I've been here to learn more about a lot of the struggles that our manufacturing customers are facing. So with that, let's talk about the CMMC timeline. So Michael did a fantastic job of reviewing the past, sort of everything up to when the rule was finalized, but what happens next? So you see here, you've got some orange boxes on the left-hand side, and they're talking about something called 48 proposed CFR Rule 32. There's a lot of numbers involved on that side. 32 CFR is the final rule for CMMC. 48 CFR is the one that we're still waiting on. So you're going to move over now to the blue bubbles or the blue boxes on the other side. So CMMC is in effect, like Michael said, as of the 16th of December 2024. There are already CMMC assessments being done by certified third-party assessor organizations, or C3PAOs. But there also are, as Michael has said, a lot of contracts that are coming out, RFPs, RFIs, BPAs that are coming out with this requirement baked into them because they know that it's going to be the standard for the foreseeable future. Now, let's go back to that CFR 48 in that second box that you see in blue on the right. CFR 48, when it comes out, it was the companion legislation for the CMMC final rule. What does that mean? That means that if I'm a program manager in the government or if I'm a contracting officer, I need to have the actual rule in place stating, how do I put this into my contract? That's 48 CFR. That is the how do we get CMMC into contracts? How, as a government person, am I going to deal with that? We were hoping it would come out by the end of the first quarter, but unfortunately, it's been pushed back a little bit. It's most likely not going to come out probably until May or June, which is what you see in the blue box. The reason why this is significant is because that's the start of a phased out rollout approach that the DoD has put into place. And there's a whole lot more information on that, but that's just something to be aware of, that in the coming months, CFR 48 is going to get finalized, and then the phased approach, there's 4 phases, will begin. So that's something really important to remember. And the second point at the bottom here, it says CMMC will enter DoD contracts in mid-2025. The DoD has identified, we don't know which contracts they are yet, of course, but 156 contracts that they will be including CMMC on. So at some point between May, June of this year and the end of this year, about 156 contracts are going to be identified to have CMMC added to them. So that's something really important to remember. And to another point that Michael made, that's so true. Honestly, in a lot of ways, this may not even matter to some of you, especially if you're subcontractors who are working with a prime who is requiring you to be CMMC certified or compliant. Next slide, please. So this is a really fantastic quote from Bob Metzger. If you have not seen him speak before, he is an incredibly, incredibly knowledgeable cybersecurity attorney. The problem for most contractors is that you won't know in advance when the compliance requirement will come to you or when your prime will ask you to show that you are ready. Most organizations find that it takes 6 to 18 months to pass their assessment. Now, this is absolutely true. If you're going it alone without a partner, like, for example, PreVeil or many others that are out there in the environment, if you're going it alone, 6 to 18 months, honestly, could be considered kind of on the low side of an estimate. Most of our customers who come to us who have tried to do this on their own, it's more a 12 to 24 month experience. So this is honestly kind of taking it down a little bit. So if you are in a situation where you're struggling a bit with compliance, we're one of the organizations that can help you out. Next slide, please. So CMMC for manufacturers. Again, this is a very unique situation. It's one that I hadn't encountered before. How manufacturers do have very unique situations with the operational technology that is used and being able to make that compliant. So if you handle CUI, you are required to meet CMMC level 2. The easiest way to tell if you're going to have a CMMC assessment, look at your contract. Does your contract, either your subcontract, your prime contract, does it have any requirements for compliance? Does it have a DFAR, DFARS 7012? clause at the end of the contract. If there is that clause, then you are already expected to be NIST 800-171 compliant, which is what CMMC level 2 is based on. So essentially, you're already kind of expected to be CMMC at this point. You just aren't expected to get an assessment quite yet. The vast majority of organizations, 95%, are going to be required to go through a third-party assessment in some way. That is probably, honestly, even that number is probably lower than we think it is. There's going to be so many organizations. Currently, the estimate is about 80,000 companies, which is just a crazy number of companies when you think about it. And they're going to have to get assessed by different, like you see here, the third-party assessor organizations or the C3PAOs. There are proven strategies to get compliant and save money by deploying enclaves, like, for example, what PreVeil offers. We have quite a few different manufacturing customers who use PreVeil as an enclave. And what an enclave means is if, let's say, you have 50 employees, but really only 10 of them actually need to access CUI. Well, then you would make sure that only those 10 people and their 10 different laptops or desktops or anything they're using to interact with CUI, those people would be part of your enclave. So it is sort of a subset of users out of your main user pool that can access CUI and interact with it. You do not have to go with an enclave. You don't have to go into an enclave with PreVeil. We have many customers who use us for all of the CUI for their entire company since everybody deals with it. But that is an option that you have. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is our PreVeil 10 steps to compliance. We've had, I believe, as of this morning, we've had our 19th, so that's 19th customer who has successfully gone through an assessment. So that includes 4 different certified third-party assessor organizations who have used PreVeil as part of their own assessment. So I feel like that's a really important point to make, that the people who are being assessed to be the assessors have used PreVeil 4 different times successfully. So that's really cool. So the first thing to do, familiarize yourself with CMMC and make sure you understand what level you're going to have to be addressing. So as Michael had mentioned, there's 3 different levels. So if you have a DFAR 7012 clause, most likely you're going to be level 2. If you don't have a DFAR 7012 clause, but you have a FAR 52204 clause, then you are going to have to be CMMC level 1. I will say everyone will have to be at least level 1. So let me make that very clear. Everybody's going to have to be at least level 1. Most people are going to have a DFAR 7012 clause, so they're going to have to be level 2, and level 3 will be very intentionally specified in your contract. Level 3 is still relatively new for the DoD, so there's not really anything telling that we have right now, but they will expressly tell you that, your contracting officer. So step 2, select and deploy a FedRAMP and DFARS compliant platform to store and share your CUI. Commercial solutions are not an option. The reason why they're not an option is, for example, Microsoft 365. That is a perfect example. So many of you probably are using that now. We have a ton of customers who use Microsoft 365 to supplement all of their security for CMMC. However, you can't use it directly, meaning you can't send an email with CUI on commercial Microsoft because it is not compliant with FedRAMP and more specifically DFAR 7012 requirements for cloud service providers. So what are you supposed to do? Well, if you come to someone like us, so PreVeil is an end-to-end encrypted email and file storage solution. We're also zero trust, meaning we'll never see any of your data. We'll never have your keys. We'll never have any of your information. You will keep all of that stuff yourself, but we provide the platform for you to do it. And we make sure that all the compliance on our side is already done. We are FedRAMP and DFARS compliant, so you don't have to worry about that. The third step would be to scope your boundary. And I will say this is the single most important step you will take in your compliance journey. I'll say it a million times more probably of my life, but it really is. And the reason why is exactly what I was talking about with your enclave approach. You know, what if you have 50 people and you say to yourself, great, I'll just give everybody CUI access. Okay, well, if all 50 people really need it, then that makes sense. But what if they don't? What if 40 of those people are, you know, HR and they're doing HR related tasks, and you've got some people in there who do marketing like Seth does, you know, or other just random sort of administrative tasks. Those people probably don't interact with controlled and classified information. So does it really make sense to have them as part of the boundary? And the answer is probably not. But these are the questions you have to start asking yourself. Think about the chain of custody with CUI. How does it come into your organization? Who interacts with it? And how does it leave? And try to scope that down as tiny as you can, because you're going to have to maintain this pretty much in perpetuity as long as you have DoD contracts. And then develop robust documentation. I think we should probably bold that and put it in like, the biggest font we possibly can, the robust part. Documentation is probably the thing that most customers that we have struggle with. I'd say significantly more than technology implementation or anything else. The documentation is a struggle. It is a lot of very specific documentation. You have to answer each of the controls in a specific way to make sure that all of the information is captured there so that your assessment team can then review everything and verify it for you. So it is it can be very heavy lift. And we at PreVeil actually, and I think Seth will be talking about this a little bit more, we at PreVeil actually have a solution to sort of help with the documentation itself. Conduct a self-assessment against NIST 800-171A. If you're not familiar with NIST 800-171A, it is the NIST 800-171 assessment guide. So when you do a self-assessment, you're assessing yourself against 110 controls for NIST 800-171. And in those 110 controls, be as honest as you possibly can with yourself. If every single objective that is under that control is not fully implemented, then that control is not fully implemented. So you need to be as honest as you can with yourself. Remember, the most important thing is the DoD just wants you to be honest about this. They want you to be upfront about this. A lot of the people that we have seen who have ended up in situations where they're getting a random audit from the DIBCAC, it's usually because they have misrepresented themselves in some ways. So be very careful about that. Next slide, please. Creating your POAMs. If you're not familiar with what a POAM is, that's a plan of action and milestone. And then you have to execute them. So what that means is this is my list of stuff, hey, you've gone through your self-assessment. You found like 7 or 8 different controls you're probably not fully implementing. You add those controls to your POAM list and you work them to closure, meaning work them until they are completely and fully addressed and a solution is provided. And then you need to update your documentation. So let's say that one of your POAM items was to get a new vulnerability scanner and, you work through everything, you look at multiple different options and you decide to settle on Tenable. Okay, great. Well, your documentation currently says that you don't have a vulnerability scanner. So you're going to have to go through all that documentation and make sure that now your vulnerability scanner being Tenable is updated in all of the appropriate places across your documentation. And that's just one example. Updating your documentation can be up for a million different reasons, but that's just one example. And then number 8, conduct another self-assessment. So now that you've gone through, you've done your first assessment, you've implemented a lot of these POAM'd items, you've got them fully implemented, you've updated all of your appropriate documentation. Well, now you need to double check if you actually did everything right. And the same rules apply here. You want to be as honest with yourself as possible. If there's anywhere where you feel like you're slipping, go ahead and put it on your POAM. What I like to tell customers is treat your own environment like you are an assessor. If I'm an assessor coming from a totally outside perspective, how am I going to know that you're actually doing what you say you're doing? That's the way to think about it. And then start gathering that information and writing your documentation in that way. You are telling a story to your assessment team. You are telling a story about how your organization is compliant with CMMC. So it needs to be compelling. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It should answer the who, what, where, when, why. And this is optional. You can do those as many times as you want. So steps 7 through 10 can be done as many times as you need to do. So then the optional step of 9 is working with the partner for a final check. So that can be a gap analysis. It can be a readiness assessment, a mock assessment, all of those work. Like, there's a lot of interchangeable sort of nomenclature for this particular thing. But essentially, you just want a third party to come in and double check you. That's really what it comes down to. If you have somebody, honestly, there's a lot of AI options out there, which those can be okay, but really having a person involved is probably your best bet right now, just to be super sure that you're not missing anything. And then step 10 is scheduling your assessment. But I want to point out, we have this 10 steps to compliance, but there should be like an 11 step, which is just keep doing this over and over and over again until you don't have a DoD contract. So this is something that you'll keep doing in perpetuity. You have to maintain all of this. So whatever you decide to do, let's say you schedule your assessment, you get a 110 out of 110. You have to do this again in 3 years. And every year you still are required to do your self-assessment and put that into the DoD system SPURS. So it's something really important to remember that this is something you're going to be maintaining long-term. And now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth Steinman, our VP of Marketing, who will help us answer some more PreVeil specific questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Noelle. So you kind of heard the what is CMMC, how to do it, but the question we get most often is, what tools or technologies available to help me? And so we wanted to share PreVeil with you. It's the leading solution for manufacturers and more generally small and medium-sized businesses in the defense industrial base. This is why we created PreVeil. It's trusted by thousands of contractors, and as Noel mentioned, proven in 19 now CMMC assessments where our customers have gotten perfect 110 scores. So we offer a three-part solution. You could think of this as three legs of our stool. So it all starts with our technology. It's an email and drive file sharing that allows you and enables you to protect the CUI within hours of signing up. And that's what CMMC is all about. It's protecting the CUI. The second stool is the compliance accelerator. As Noel mentioned, it's not enough to just protect it. We need to say, how are we protecting it? And that's what this documentation enables you to do, and it walks you through it. And then third is our partner network, which is there from preparation all the way through to assessment to help you. And all three of these legs of the stool are designed to save you time and money and simplify the process for you. So let's dig into each of them. The first is email and drive. So you can think of PreVeil Drive as Dropbox, but more secure. Every email you send, every file, every folder is end-to-end encrypted, meaning that even if an attacker gets access to the servers, they're not going to find anything. It's all just gobbledygook. So it adheres to the NSA Zero Trust framework, and it really has unrivaled security for you. But it's also easy to use because you can access it on your browser, you can access it on your phone. For Drive, you can access it right in Windows Explorer or Mac Finder. And then with email, you can actually access it right through your Gmail or your Outlook accounts. It creates a separate encrypted inbox right in your inbox there. And it's using the exact same email address, which is great. So when you think about the end users within your company, they can figure it out really, really quickly. And it enables you to really meet that security and compliance requirements. Down at the bottom, you can see this technology supports 102 out of the 110 controls. It meets all the requirements of CMMC, FedRAMP, FIPS, DFARS. And if anyone here has any international customers or deals with ITAR data, because of the State Department's 120.54 end-to-end encryption carve-out, we also meet those ITAR requirements. So, a single platform that meets, multiple compliance frameworks here. And I mentioned, and Noel mentioned that protecting the CUI is not enough, right? You need to show how you're doing it. And so Noel, who actually I think maybe sold yourself short a little bit on your intro here, she's actually a CCA, so she's an assessor herself, has all the requirements, helped create this accelerator. So there's a few different parts of it. First is all the pre-filled documentation, and we showed some examples here on the right. It's that system security plan, the POAM template, the standard operating procedures. You're going to need all of this. And so instead of paying someone to start from scratch or writing it yourself, we offer these pre-filled templates where you can just put your company information, some specific setups you may have into this existing documentation. We also have all these videos that walk you through all 110 controls. PreVeil supports many of them. We say exactly what we do, how we help, and even for the ones we don't touch, we say here's how you can go do it yourself. And those are all right there within our learning management system. Plus, if you get stuck, if you have questions, you can always reach out to our team. Noel is there here to help for one-on-one compliance support. So the third leg of our stool is our partner network. So if you don't have the time or don't have the in-house expertise, we built this preferred partner network. All of these consultants, MSPs, and assessors have been vetted by the CyberAD, the accreditation board. And then they've been further vetted by our compliance team. So they know PreVeil, they know our documentation, they know our systems, they know our technology. And that all just saves you time and money because they're not starting from scratch. They're not learning like a brand new system. They've worked with us, they've worked with other customers, and they can help you. So let's put it all together. PreVeil, it's a proven solution. It's been used in audits, and it saves it saves money as manufacturers need to achieve CMMC. Here's an example. Delaware Metals is one of our customers. We actually have a case study on our site. If you want to check that out or reach out, happy to send it to you. Here's what their operations compliance manager said. PreVeil made it so easy. It was really just a no-brainer. Affordable, integrates with everything, and it just works. So they actually deployed many of the strategies Noel mentioned earlier. They air-gapped their CNC machines. Again, anytime you can, reduce the scope of your compliance boundary, it can save you money. And they did that here. They used PreVeil to achieve ITAR compliance, and they won more defense contracts because of it. The next question that you may have is like, how much does all this stuff cost? The DoD has some estimates on the website. On their website. We're happy to share those with you. But PreVeil offers this PreVeil Pass, which we found is a great fit for most small to medium manufacturers. It includes 3 licenses to access CUI in email and Drive across all your devices. Again, you can share with all your suppliers for free with PreVeil, which is great as well. It includes access to the Compliance Accelerator and access to our partner network, all for $415 per month. And then I will pass it over to Michael, who will share some more tips for saving money and resources available to you.
Great. Thank you, Seth, and thank you, Noel, for the wealth of information and really breaking it down into some manageable pieces. I think the 10 steps to compliance it's a guidebook that everybody should follow and should take note of, because it can be confusing, and we understand it. We understand that for manufacturers, and especially the small manufacturers, right? It's a little bit of alphabet soup. It's a little bit of lots of different wording and lots of different nuances, and it can be a little bit scary, especially if you're a small company, right? How do you make this real on your plant floor, and how do you make it real without bankrupting the organization? And so my piece here is to share with you that there are resources available, understanding that depending on where you are geographically in the country, there are resources that are available. Seth just laid out a network that they have at PreVeil. I talked a little bit about the MEP National Network, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the resources that are available here for any manufacturers that are in Maryland. And I realize that not everyone on the phone here today or on the call here today is in Maryland, but I can just talk a little bit about our experience. So as I said, Maryland pushed into helping manufacturers and suppliers deal with cybersecurity and cybersecurity compliance back in 2017. We launched the Defense Cybersecurity Assistance Program, and it was really designed to help the small and the mid-sized manufacturer, because that's what 95% of our companies are, and most of those are very small, less than 20 employees. Understand and navigate the process, right? Understand how to conduct an assessment, providing assistance in conducting those assessments, providing assistance in mitigating the issues that are identified through the assessment, and then most importantly, providing access to that expertise. What Seth just shared, I think, is really critical. It can be overwhelming for many companies to try to tackle this on your own, because if you just do a Google search or you just go hit the internet, you'll come across hundreds, if not thousands, of cybersecurity experts and cybersecurity providers. And so having a network of providers and partners that are vetted by boots on the streets, they have case studies with manufacturers. They've worked with partners at the state and the federal and the local level, who can verify that, one, they're rightly priced, two, they're doing what they claim to be able to do, and they're doing it in a manner that's going to help you move towards compliance is really critical. So I would encourage anyone who's just undertaking this Don't just buy the first result that you get. Use your networks, use your contacts, use the MEP system as a network. Use folks like the PreVeil team as a resource. Another thing that we have here in Maryland that is pretty unique and a testament to the state of Maryland pushing forward in this. Maryland launched a Buy Maryland cyber tax credit close to 10 years ago now. And what that tax credit is if you're a small business and you buy cybersecurity services from an approved small cybersecurity provider within Maryland, you're able to get a tax credit for those services back. So it helps offset and defray some of those costs. The other thing I can say is here in Maryland, we have funding for cybersecurity training. So initially, our DCAP, our Defense Cybersecurity Assistance Program, was built on funding made available by the Department of Defense. Some of that has sunsetted, but the state has continued to invest in cybersecurity training. So it's training for individuals and training for the organization on how to comply not just with good cyber hygiene and good cyber practices, but also with changing your policies and implementing the controls necessary to comply with the CMMC and the other standards. And the biggest piece is rely on that ecosystem. And if we could go to the next slide. Again, I'm talking a little bit selfishly here for what we have in Maryland because that's where I live and that's the organization that I run. But as part of the MEP National Network, I can tell you that a good number of the MEP centers provide services and assistance related to cybersecurity, and the ones that don't, they typically know where to look for funding and support. Each state is a little bit different. It's something that has been left at the state level, but there are often state and local resources. One, to help cover the cost of this, to cover the cost of the assessment and the implementation and the mitigation, but also to cover the costs of training. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local MEP center to identify what those funding resources are available. And my contact information is at the end of this. If anyone doesn't know who to contact at the local level, we can get that for you. But also use those state and local resources to gain access to the expertise. One of the benefits of the MEP system is if we don't have the answer in-house, we're able to leverage our sister centers within the network. So we're able to leverage expertise from across the country, and we can bring that expertise to bear. And as I mentioned, PreVeil has worked with a number of MEPs around the country. They are a partner, a provider within the MEP network, but there are others as well. And one of the things that's really important, and it came through with what both Seth and Noel said, is understanding that even though this can seem scary and this can seem burdensome, there are ways to right size it for your organization. I know a question popped up earlier about a small 2-3 person shop and how can those shops comply with this. It's really important to step back and look at your infrastructure and look at your operation and look at how you can begin to compartmentalize some of this information. Seth mentioned a case study where they had a client air gap a legacy machine, right? And they did that so they were able to better control the information that was there, but also limit the risk and limit the amount of the scope that they had to bring up to these levels of secure standards. So there's different ways to do it. And I can tell you, I've been in, a machine shop that was in an old school and the roof was falling down and there were no doors on the building. And when you talk about putting cybersecurity in a building like that, it's not going to be the same as if it's a brand new shiny lights out facility. And so understanding how to limit the risk, how to understand what information you've got is important, what controlled or classified information you have is important, and then putting in the right controls for the size of the organization. There is no one size fits all on this, and although it's one standard and one set of controls, how a company begins to address those standards, there is a little bit of wiggle room in there to implement it in a way that's right sized for the organization. And so I guess my last tip or my closing tip is there are resources out there for suppliers and manufacturers of all sizes. It's not just the big guys. We are going to see We're going to see this more and more in the contract language. Noel talked about the contracts that and the numbers of contracts that will be picked this year, but it's becoming commonplace, and it's becoming commonplace even outside of the DoD. I have suppliers and vendors to other agencies of the government that are seeing this same cybersecurity language. So don't think it's just a DoD thing. Look at it as a good manufacturing practice, a good practice as a business to ensure the long-term sustainability and leverage the resources that are out there, both with Xometry, with PreVeil, with the MEP national system, and even at the state and the local levels. Don't try to go at it on your own because it can be very overwhelming. And Megan, I think I'm going to turn it back to you with that.
It's that time. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you. This has been a wealth of information with some great actionable steps. And what you all may not have seen if you haven't been in the Q&A is that our panelists are very multi-talented. They've been responding to questions live while speaking. But we are going to offer up a few additional minutes for Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to drop them along the bottom there. Type in your question. You can submit with your name, or you can submit anonymously, and you can also upvote questions. So if someone else has asked a question you really want to know the answer to, feel free to upvote it. I also encourage you to go on through and look at any answered questions that are already there, and I will ask out loud some of the newer questions. So Solomon asks, how does this certification tie into an ISO QMS?
So, the ISO stuff. This is a question we get all the time. The only ISO that has, I'd say, like a decent amount of coverage that I have seen is 27001. All of the other ones there's really not very much crossover at all. I'm not familiar with that particular ISO, but I can almost guarantee you it's probably going to be a very similar situation where, again, only ISO 27001 have I seen that really does have a lot of crossover. So it may have a little bit, but it probably doesn't have very much.
Well, thanks, Noel. This next one is for Michael. Michael, I know you're with the Maryland MEP, but are you aware of any similar programs for Pennsylvania?
I'm aware that there are Pennsylvania actually has 7 MEP centers. There are smaller regions. So I'm aware that Pennsylvania does provide some cybersecurity services, but I can connect you, depending on where you are in the state, to find out what resources from a financial standpoint are available.
Excellent. So whoever asked that question, if you want to drop in your name and email address privately, we will get back to you. All right. Kim asks, do you provide policies and procedures to help meet the requirements? I assume that one is for PreVeil.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm assuming that's for us. Yeah, so we actually offer, so we call it our PreVeil Compliance Accelerator, was kind of what Seth was sort of reviewing. Those 10 steps to compliance are the accelerator. So each one of those steps has a video with me explaining everything to you, talking about the step. There's a document that's attached with it explaining all the steps of, for example, scoping is a good one. Here are the questions to ask yourselves. Here are the things you need to think about. Some lessons learned that we've had from all of these different customers who've gone through assessments and that sort of thing. And then as you keep going through it, each of the steps has documentation to support it. So we invented a fake company, just, fake little average company in the DIB. And we created all of the compliance documentation we could possibly think of for them. So procedural documentation, training, there's risk assessment information, incident response, everything you can think of. So even though we do not support every single one of the controls and objectives, we still wrote to all of them. So all of that information is already there. And that documentation has already been through at least, I think, probably about 6 or 7 of those assessments, those 19 that I mentioned. So it's also been vetted as well. And it comes, as I think Seth mentioned this too, it also comes with access to me and my team. So I'm a certified CMMC assessor, a certified CMMC professional. We have other CCPs or certified CMMC professionals on staff who also take these calls. We get emails from customers all the time. We'll talk about anything compliance with you, whatever you need. So yes, we do already have some of that stuff done. We also have an SSP that's like 50 or 60% of the way already filled out for you as well. And again, addresses all 110 controls.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Noel. Adam is asking, does ITAR compliance require CMMC compliance?
Oh, yes. The reason I'm saying that is because ITAR is sort of this is where things get interesting. ITAR is technically a subclass of CUI. There are 199 subclasses, CTI, CDI, all of those are considered types of CUI. ITAR is a type of CUI, but unlike the other 198 types, it is not directly controlled by the DoD. It is actually controlled by the Department of State. So the Department of State has different requirements. Now, I will say most of the time, I'm going to just make that with a little asterisk next to it. Most of the time, if you have ITAR, you are probably going to have a CMMC level 2 requirement anyway, most of the time, but not always. I would definitely recommend, especially with any ITAR customers that we have, I always recommend they look back on their contracts or they reach out to their primes to be very sure as to what their responsibility is. If you don't have a DFAR 7012 clause in your contract, if you don't have a CMMC clause, which nobody really should at this point anyway, but if you don't have a DFAR 7012 or a DFAR 7021 clause in your contract, then maybe that's when you need to have the conversation, because those are the two that are going to be from the DoD saying you have to be CMMC. It may be a little bit different for you with whatever organization you're working for that you're sharing that ITAR with. So definitely it's a little weird answer. I know it's not really straightforward, but double check basically.
Well, thank you. We are getting some questions about the recording. We are going to send around the recording of this after the fact. Look out in your email for that. All right. Someone says, we are new at looking at this. There's so many levels to this and different types of assessments. Where's the best place to actually get started if you're clueless like us?
Oh, Seth, would you like to take that?
Yeah, and they're looking at CMMC level 2, so they're controlling, processing, transmitting CUI, and we really recommend starting with the research, starting with the 10 steps Noel mentioned. We have a guide on PreVeil's website that kind of walks you through an introduction to CMMC, specifically level 2, specifically for small, medium-sized businesses and manufacturers. I can put the link in there, but if you go to PreVeil, and that's PreVeil with an E except instead of an A, .com, we have it right in there. So, and it's right on the top of our website. So I'll put it in here. But that guide's a really good place to start, and includes a lot of resources for you.
Excellent.
The other, Megan, there's a question here too from Tom that I would just like to jump in with, because the question that we get a lot, and I'm sure Michael does too, is these assessments themselves. That's the final piece, right? The C3PAO assessment. There's not that many assessors out there right now. They're generally $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. So they can be expensive, and there's sometimes a backlog. What we're telling customers, and Noel, please correct me and expand upon this, but is do the first parts first, right? Protect CUI, get your documentation in place, update your SPRS score, and follow those requirements. Getting the certification, it can wait at least a little bit, because we recognize it's expensive. We recognize that there's a backlog, but be assessment ready is kind of our overall guidance. So I would let Noel and Michael kind of expand upon that, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm seeing variations of that question come up.
Steph, I'll jump in, and I think that's a great recommendation. We equate it to the ISO certification, right? We have a number of manufacturers that are ISO compliant, and they'll take the steps all the way up to needing that certification, so that they're just the audit and the cost of the audit away from needing that certification. So we encourage our manufacturers who are in this space, who aren't quite being asked for it yet, to put all of the pieces in place so that they're CMMC ready, right? And they're just missing that last piece of it.
I think that's the perfect way of putting it. And I do want to point out, because I know that there was someone in the comments who was making a comment about that. It is a very expensive endeavor. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's no way around that, unfortunately. The unfortunate stance that the DoD is taking is that this is essentially the cost of doing business with the DoD. It's also moving to the federal space as well. It's something I also want to mention to everyone. There is currently a proposed rule that is out for, actually, they just closed it for comment. So it's going to become a final rule probably sometime this year and early next, where the federal government is going to be requiring this as well. So if you are in government space, this is most likely going to get larger, not smaller. It's going to be expand out to other agencies. If you're in a situation where you feel like, you know what, I can't keep up with this, maybe DoD work is not where you want to be anymore. Maybe federal work is not where you want to be anymore. I will say though that we've had a lot of customers who have started companies and have said, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and be CMMC because then I'm going to get picked before somebody who doesn't. So it's actually becoming a marketing plus if you have CMMC already, because the DoD is heading that direction and because of the fact that the federal government is as well. And to Seth's point, and also to Michael's too, like you don't have to be assessed right now for CMMC. That is not a requirement right now, unless there's something specifically in your contract that says that. And there shouldn't really be very many at all, except for those 156 I mentioned earlier. The phase 1 rollout for CMMC, once CFR 48 goes live, let's say that's July 1st, you'll have a solid year after that to do self-assessment only before you're required to do that secondary, actual third-party assessment. So to Michael's point, it's about being ready for it, because at any point from a contractual standpoint, like I talked about the DFAR 7012 clause, if you have a DFAR 7012 clause, or if your prime does, that means that's a flow down to you. You're already expected to be doing this stuff. And the DoD technically can come in and assess you at any point they want to make sure that you're doing this. So it's just something to be thinking about. And I love the way you phrase that, Michael. Be assessment ready. You don't necessarily have to get an assessment right now, but just be ready if and when you have to have one.
I think that's great advice. And we're getting a lot of questions in here about cost. And there's another one here from Steve asking, did you say that CMMC certification costs $30,000? Can you expound upon an estimated cost for a two-man shop?
So most of the ones that we've had that are smaller, because we do have a lot of smaller companies that we work with, we have actual partners that will reduce that cost a little bit because they're familiar with PreVeil. So if that's something you're interested in, I definitely think, it would definitely be a great idea to reach out to us so we can help you out. The lowest I have seen, period, is $25,000. And that I think was for like a 3 or 4 person shop, if I'm not mistaken, but please don't quote me on that. But it was relatively small. And I think it was about 25 or 30,000. It's the lowest one I have seen anywhere. And that again was with a PreVeil partner. And there was a deal there that they made. And again, our partners are separate from us, of course, they're going to make whatever deals they're going to make. But yeah, that is the absolute lowest I've seen it. Now it is going to start coming down most likely over, this year and next, because as Seth pointed out, we don't have enough assessors right now. I'm one of like 300 in like the whole world. There's not very many of us. It's a very tiny number. So as more assessors get certified, as more people come out, the price will come down. But right now, unfortunately, since there's such a tiny number of resources, it's just supply and demand right now.
And Noel, just to clarify, that's for the assessment itself that gets paid to the C3PAO.
Exactly,
right?
to the certified third-party assessor organization. Thank you, Seth. Exactly. Yep.
Great. Yeah.
All right. I think we are closing in on the last of the questions. I know we also had a few resources we wanted to chat very quickly about before we sign off for the day. If you have other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And again, we will try to connect you with any of the relevant speakers after the presentation. All right. So just love to turn it over to Seth and to Noel to very briefly say a few words about PreVeil.
Yeah, I'll combine it with a question that we got earlier, which is like, what's the difference between Microsoft and PreVeil? So Microsoft does offer a compliance solution. It's called GCC High. It's just super expensive, and it requires a full kind of rip and replace, and requires you to have guest licenses. And we have a full breakdown on our website you can check out. And so that's where a lot of these cost savings come in is PreVeil versus a solution like GCC High. So what a lot of our customers do is use the commercial Microsoft 365, which you're probably already using or paying for, or commercial Gmail, and then you just use PreVeil for when you are kind of storing or sharing the CUI piece that kind of sits on top of it, and you're going to see a significant cost savings with that setup. So that's a very common use case for many manufacturers. If you do have any questions, you want us to share a case study or any of the resources I mentioned, we also have a cost calculator, CMMC cost calculator, that shows what CMMC will cost your organization, as well as how it compares to GCCI. That's on our website as well. It's like preveil.com/CMMC-cost-calculator. So I would check that out too.
Excellent. That sounds like a great resource. And Michael, do you want to say a few closing words about Maryland MEP before we head out?
Just, on behalf of Maryland MEP and really all of the MEP centers, understand there's resources out there. Don't be afraid to ask for support. We realize it's expensive and it's an expensive endeavor. Know that we are working to try to, get resources to help offset those costs, whether it be at the federal level, from DoD or some of the partners and stakeholders there, or at the state level. Every case is unique, but there are resources out there, and don't try to go at it on your own. Use the network, use the network of experts and providers that are undertaking this work, and just hang with it, because it is important. It is not going to go away, and it's going to become an even bigger part as we continue to see the domestic supply chain grow.
Excellent. And I want to thank all of our speakers today for the resources, for all of their expertise, a wealth of information here for all of these attendees. Speaking on behalf of Xometry and Thomas, just want to say that we are very pleased to have the speakers here and to provide these types of educational resources. As I mentioned at the top, Xometry is the leading on-demand manufacturing platform, helping suppliers find profitable work and improve cash flow and shop efficiency. And Thomas is our supplier discovery platform, offering suppliers the opportunity to generate leads for their business on ThomasNet. I want to thank everyone for attending today, and please keep an eye on your email for the follow-up presentation. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.